Hello everyone, I am Zahirahan from Group 5 and our topic for the MOVE project is communication, more specifically expressive communication. In this presentation, our team will be discussing about expressive communication with more details and clarity so that it's easier to understand. So without any further ado, let's start. Expressive communication. What does it really mean? Well, expressive communication refers to the ability to communicate using verbal languages and nonverbal cues, such as gestures and facial expression. It is the output of languages, the ability to express your wants and needs through verbal or nonverbal communication. It is the ability to put thoughts into words and sentences in such a way that makes sense and is grammatically correct as well. And now my team member will take over from here discussing further about this topic.
Body language is a type of nonverbal communication in which physical behaviors, as opposed to words, are used to express or convey the information. Such behavior includes facial expressions, body posture, gesture, eye movement, touch, and the use of space. Whether you are aware of it or not, when you interact with others, you are continuously giving and receiving worded signals. Most of it happens without conscious awareness. A simple example of body language is a relaxed facial expression that breaks out into a genuine smile, with mouth upturned and eyes wrinkled. Equally, it can be a tilt of the head that shows you are thinking, an upright stance to convey interest, or hand and arm movement to demonstrate directions. It can also be taking care to avoid a defensive, arms crossed posture, or restlessly tapping your feet. When you can read signs like this, you can understand the complete message in what someone is telling you. You will be more aware of people's reaction to what you say and do, and you will be able to adjust your body language to appear more positive, engaging, and approachable. Body language assists us in understanding and decoding what the person is saying. Body language also helps interpret other people's moods and emotions. Apart from this, it enhances our conscious understanding of people's reaction to what we say and how we say it. The importance of body language lies in the manner in which it impacts your personal brand. Whether it is a job interview, first date, or even an average day in one's life as an employee, how one presents them is important.
Now let's take a look at expressive communication from a wider angle. We will take a look at three crucial things that affect how we communicate with others. The first picture, as you can see, is a clock which indicates time. How does time come into communication, right? So if you think about it, we act differently at different times of the day. Now what do I mean by different times of the day? So let's look at phases that we have of the day, right? So we have the morning, afternoon, evening, night, and midnight. Depending on the kind of person you are, you will act differently at different times of the day, which will also affect your communication with someone else at different times of the day. For example, let's take a night owl. They will want to sleep during morning since they have been awake during midnight, right? So let's say they have a work to do. So they wake up at morning, they'll feel groggy, they'll feel tired, they'll want to sleep. So they will act as if they want to end the things quickly, right? Because they want to go back to sleep. Therefore, it leads to the work being done poorly and also them not giving proper attention to the, which then, if you take these factors into communication, right? This means they'll want to end the conversations as quickly as possible, and they might not also properly give the speaker the proper attention that was necessary, right? So they will not listen properly, so the communication will not be done properly. Now let's replace the night owl with the early bird. Since the early bird have got their proper sleep, they will feel energized and refreshed. This means they can get their work done properly while giving it the proper attention that it needs. Now we take these into communication, right? This would mean that this person, while communicating, would listen to the speaker properly and also reply back properly as well, and not want to close off the conversation. Instead, this person would want to keep the conversation going for as long as the conversation is needed to go on. As we can see, the two types of people reacted to the same situation and at the same time in two different ways. So they were able to communicate their thoughts and feelings in two different ways. So hence the time is a factor while we communicate. The second picture is about silence, which at first glance seems contradictory, since silence means the lack of using any sort of sounds, and we communicate by talking, which involves making sounds, right? But lack of sound is also a very important information while we communicate with another person. Silence is an interesting form of communication without verbally communicating what we want to say to someone. Now, why would we want to do this? This depends on the context of the situation, but in general, the reason why people communicate using silence is because maybe they do not want to say it verbally, but they want to get that information to them, so they use the lack of verbal information to give them the information with the help of facial expression, posture, body language. Let's use an example to understand silence. So let's say me and my friend are at an amusement park and he wants to ride the roller coaster, but I don't want to. So he asked me, let's go to the roller coaster. I said no. He said, please, let's go. I said no. And then he asked me, please, let's go. And I went silent. He asked me again, and I kept being silent. And as that was happening, when I became silent, my hands closed off, I went slightly away from him, and my facial expression got slightly angrier. He took those hints, he saw that I became silent, and then he apologized to me, and then he said, I'm sorry, I understand you don't want to go. So he went, he enjoyed it, he came back, and then we enjoyed the rest of the day. From that example, we can see that because I went silent, the information that I don't want to go was delivered to my friend even more firmly than me saying no normally. It emphasized the fact that I don't want to go without actually me saying I do not want to go. So through silence, we can communicate our emotions and our thoughts without actually saying our emotions and our thoughts. And that makes that emotion and that thought more firm, makes it more potent to the other person. And this is how silence is used in communication. The third picture is about the setting or the environment that we're in during our conversations. Human beings are social creatures, and we are also good at adapting to situations and doing what we think is right in that situation. The environment that we're in while communicating with another person also affects how we communicate with that person. This is primarily based on our emotions, since the environment that we're in will trigger a different emotional response from us, which will then trigger a different reaction to how we communicate with someone. Let's use a few settings as an example to understand how it affects us while we communicate with someone else. Let's first use home as a setting. So let's say you've invited some of your friends and you're hanging out on your room and you're talking. Since home is a setting that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable of, the conversations that you will have with your friend will be more free-flowing, it will be dynamic, there will be no restrictions, everybody will share their thoughts and feelings openly. Now let's use cafe as an example instead of home. Since cafe is a public place, there will be other people around you, which means there's less privacy in this setting. Therefore, the conversations you will have with your friend will be more restricted. There are certain topics you will not bring up, and you will not be able to express yourself freely and openly. By comparing the two scenarios, you can see that by changing the setting and keeping everything else the same, the conversation that you had with your friends changed. This shows that the setting that we're in while we're communicating with someone also affects how we communicate with someone. My teammate will now take over for the next part.
Hello everyone, my name is Jeline. I'm going to talk about the expressive communication in different cultures. As my friend Zahir has mentioned, expressive communication is an act or process of using words, sound, sign, or behavior to exchange information, express ideas, thoughts, feelings to someone else. Expressive or non-verbal communication varies across culture, and communication norms are expressions of each culture's values. There are 4 examples I'm going to talk about, which are general appearance and dress, posture, touch, and smell. These are the examples we'll make an appearance of a person, especially in a business setting. Firstly, all cultures are concerned of how they look and make judgment based on looks and dress. For instance, Americans, they appear almost obsessed with dress and personal attractiveness. Consider differing culture standards on what is attractive in dress and on what constitutes modesty. Also, the way people dress is also used as a sign of status. Next, posture also plays an important role in expressive communication. I'm sure most of you have watched Korean dramas or Korean TV shows, and many people may wonder, why do they have to bow when they say hello, I'm sorry, thank you, or goodbye. This shows that how they show respect to each other, and it is a basis of politeness. This not only in Korea but also other East Asian countries such as Japan and China. The funny thing is, the more you bow to your speaker, the greater respect is, and the more you keep your head bowed, and the more serious you are. As for Turkey, it is disrespectful when you put your hands in your pocket and sitting with leg crossed when you are talking to someone. Thirdly, touch is important in expressive communication. So why, where, and what meaning do we assign when someone else touches us? For Islamic and Hindu culture, they typically don't touch with their left hand. If they do so, it is an social insult. Left hand for toilet functions, manually and easier to break your braid only with your right hand. It is sometimes difficult for non-Indians, even me. For Islamic cultures, they generally don't approve of any touching between genders, even shakes hands. But consider such touching, including hand-holding hugs between same sex, to be appropriate. Lastly, many Asians don't touch the head because head houses the soul and a touch puts it in jeopardy. Lastly, the smell is also affected in expressive communication. In the United States, the fear of offensive natural smell is connected with attractiveness concept. Billion-dollar industry to mass objectionable odors with what is perceived to be pleasant. Many other countries consider natural body odor is normal, like Arabic country. On the other hand, for Asian cultures like Filipino, Malay, Indonesian, Thai, Indian, they are stressed frequent bathing and often criticize USA of not bathing often enough. That's all for me. Now I'll let Praptip to continue.
These are a few ways we can use expressive communication and how it affects our verbal discourse. Firstly, we should emphasize on our words when communicating. Emphasizing a word can be a way of making our points clearer or to highlight the key terms or phrases. This can be done by changing the sound and tone when saying the words we are trying to emphasize on. The first syllable of a key word is often pronounced louder than the other syllables. This makes the message that we are trying to say much clearer. Secondly, it can also be used to repeat or accompany a verbal message. During a conversation, one may use expressive communication while accompanying it with a verbal message. For example, we can point in a certain direction while verbally stating a location to someone who may have asked us about, to show him a place or something. We may also nod our head while saying yes when someone asks us a question. Thirdly, we can substitute our words with expressive language when communicating with others. Expressive language can be anything from speaking to gesturing, to facial expression and vocalization. We often try to put things in words, but actually a simple gesture is sufficient in certain situations. For example, a school teacher can use a simple gesture by putting his or her finger on their lips to indicate for silence when the class gets too noisy. We can also use expressive communication when verbal communication would be disturbing. For example, we can use gestures to signal to a friend when one is ready to leave the library so that it does not disturb the others.
So now we talk about ways expressive communication affects our verbal discourse regulated speech. Communication regulation help define the limits of freedom of speech. Regulations sets limits on the content of communication for a variety of a reason, including the protection of personal or secret information, a desire to limit false and misleading claims, and the encouragement of debate. Then talk about contradicting is sending a nonverbal message that disagrees with what is being said. This can be done deliberately in the order to confuse. It also may happen subconsciously when lying. Then talk about verbal signals. Verbal communication is the use of sounds and language to convey the message or for giving information. Nonverbal communication refers to the communication through signs, body language, and gestures.
Now that you've learned more about expressive communication, what about how to utilize them? Well, first of all, body movement and posture is important. Paying attention to your own and other people's body movement and posture can help in expressive communication. For example, when someone is tired, they would slump their shoulders. Another example is when someone is feeling sorry and apologizing. They would usually look down on the ground. Next, being able to express your emotions through facial expressions is one of the ways. Facial expressions are one of the most important aspects of human communication. The face is responsible for communicating not only thoughts or ideas, but also emotions. The human face is extremely expressive, able to convey countless emotions without even saying a word. The few main types of facial expressions are happiness, sadness, anger, surprise, fear, and disgust. Last but not least, making eye contact with other people is very important. When people fail to look others in the eye, they seem to be evading or trying to hide something. But making eye contact doesn't mean staring into someone's eyes. Sometimes too much eye contact can seem very intimidating. A good 4 to 5 seconds of eye contact is enough for both you and the person you're speaking to feel natural and comfortable during the conversation.
So by now you guys have some idea about the expressive communication and its subtopic such as ability to communicate using verbal and non-verbal cues, gestures, facial expression, and eye contact, body language, broad settings, ways of expressive communication, and possibly how to utilize it properly. So that's pretty much it for our presentation. Thank you so much for attending it, and I hope you all have a nice day.